I stand at the back of St. Matthew's Episcopal Church, watching my sister Emma glide down the aisle in her flowing ivory gown. The late afternoon sunlight streams through stained glass windows, casting rainbow patterns across the polished wooden pews, filled with faces I once knew. 11 years have passed since I last saw any of them. My designer black dress hugs my confident frame, my professionally styled auburn hair catches the light, and my steady gaze takes in every detail of this perfect wedding scene. Emma's new husband Jake turns around during the recessional, his eyes meeting mine across the crowded sanctuary. Later at the reception, he approaches me with curious interest. "Excuse me, do you know my wife?" he asks, studying my composed expression. I smile mysteriously, knowing this single moment will shatter everything they believe about their carefully constructed family narrative. "More than you think," I reply. The memory floods back like ice water in my veins as I watch Jake's confused expression. Senior year of high school, spring of 2012. Everyone called me ugly, but that wasn't the real story. Nobody understood why pretty 17-year-old Cassidy Walsh suddenly started cutting her long blonde hair into choppy, uneven chunks with kitchen scissors. Nobody questioned why I began wearing oversized hoodies and baggy jeans that swallowed my frame. Nobody wondered why my grades plummeted from honor roll to barely passing, why I stopped showering regularly, why I flinched whenever anyone touched me. My mother, Linda, had remarried when I was 14, 3 years after my father died in a construction accident. Rick seemed like the perfect stepfather at first. Charming smile, steady job at the insurance company, brought flowers for Mom, and took us to dinner at nice restaurants. Emma was only 12 then, still young enough to be excited about having a new daddy, but Rick had different plans for his teenage stepdaughter. It started with inappropriate comments about my developing body, then accidental brushes against me in the hallway, late-night visits to my bedroom when Mom worked her nursing shifts at the hospital. He told me nobody would believe a troubled teenager over a respected businessman. He was right. When I finally gathered courage to tell Mom what was happening, she slapped me across the face and called me a disgusting liar seeking attention. "Rick loves this family," she hissed, her face twisted with rage. "You're just jealous because Emma gets along with him better than you do. Stop making up stories to ruin our happiness." Our small town of Millbrook, Missouri thrived on reputation and appearances. Linda couldn't bear the thought of neighbors whispering about scandal in our house. So when teachers like Mrs. Henderson asked why my behavior changed so dramatically, Mom dismissed their concerns with dramatic sighs about teenage rebellion and hormones. My guidance counselor, Mr. Davis, tried repeatedly to connect with me, noticing how I jumped whenever male teachers approached my desk. He recommended counseling, but Linda refused, claiming I needed discipline, not coddling. The school nurse, Mrs. Garcia, saw the dark circles under my eyes the way I pulled my sleeves down to cover bruises on my wrists where Rick grabbed me. She called home multiple times, but Linda always had excuses ready. Meanwhile, Emma blossomed into the golden child, straight-A student cheerleader homecoming princess. She had no idea what was happening in the room next to hers because Rick was careful strategic. He knew exactly how to maintain his perfect stepfather image while destroying me piece by piece. Emma genuinely loved him, saw him as the father she barely remembered losing. The cutting and baggy clothes weren't about being ugly. They were armor. If I looked unattractive enough, maybe Rick would lose interest. If I made myself invisible, maybe the nightmare would stop. But it only made everyone else see me as the problem child, the family disappointment, the ugly duckling who couldn't measure up to perfect little Emma. My grades suffered because I couldn't concentrate. In class, couldn't sleep at night, couldn't trust any adult to help me. I started skipping school, hiding in the public library until Mom left for work, then sneaking home to avoid being alone with Rick. When neighbors asked about my appearance, Linda would shake her head sadly and complain about raising a difficult teenager who refused to take care of herself. The final explosion came at my graduation party in our backyard. Linda had invited relatives and neighbors to celebrate my barely passing diploma. I was exhausted from 3 years of abuse, worn down to nothing. When Rick cornered me in the garage and tried to force himself on me again, something inside me snapped. I screamed, fought back with everything I had knocked over, paint cans and garden tools, as I struggled to escape. Linda found us there, Rick straightening his shirt while I sobbed hysterically in the corner. Instead of protecting her daughter, she looked at the mess, the confused guests gathering at the door, the destruction of her perfect party. Her choice was instant and permanent. "Get out," she said coldly. "Pack your things and get out of my house. I'm done with your lies and drama." That night, while Emma cried in her room, confused and scared by the chaos, Linda drove me to the Greyhound station with a single suitcase and $50. She told everyone I was mentally unstable, that she'd tried everything, but couldn't help me anymore. The family closed ranks around her story, believing that sometimes loving parents have to make impossible choices about troubled children. As Jake continues studying my face at the reception, I wonder if he has any idea that his beloved wife grew up believing her big sister was crazy dangerous and thankfully gone forever. The Greyhound station at midnight looked like the end of the world. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting harsh shadows across cracked vinyl seats where a few desperate travelers waited for buses to anywhere but here. I sat clutching my suitcase handle, $50 burning in my pocket, with absolutely no plan beyond escaping Millbrook forever. Then Mrs. Patterson appeared beside me like an angel in a beige cardigan. "Cassidy Walsh, what in heaven's name are you doing here?" Eleanor Patterson lived 3 houses down from us, a retired 4th-grade teacher with silver hair and kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. She'd always waved when I walked past her garden sometimes, stopping to ask about school or comment on the weather. Now she sat beside me on the uncomfortable bench, her face full of concern. "I heard shouting from your backyard earlier," she said gently. "Saw your mother driving away with you in the car. This doesn't look like a family vacation." Something about her calm presence broke down my last defenses. The whole ugly story poured out through tears and shaking hands. Mrs. Patterson listened without interrupting occasionally, nodding or making soft sounds of sympathy. When I finished, she pulled tissues from her purse and handed them to me. "I've been documenting Rick's behavior for 8 months. She said quietly, "taking photographs of him watching you through your bedroom window, recording the times he follows you home from school when your mother's at work. I'm a mandated reporter from my teaching days, and everything about that man screams predator." She'd already called the police that morning, filing a formal report with Detective Sarah Collins. The investigation moved quickly once Mrs. Patterson presented her evidence. Rick was arrested at his office 2 days later, charged with sexual abuse of a minor. But Linda's response was swift and predictable, and she posted his bail within hours, hired the best attorney in 3 counties, and testified as a character witness about Rick's loving relationship with both her daughters. Without physical evidence beyond my word against his, and with Linda actively undermining the case, charges were reduced to a misdemeanor and eventually dismissed entirely. The judge accepted a plea deal where Rick agreed to counseling and probation. Meanwhile, Mrs. Patterson made phone calls to her network of retired educator friends across the country. Her brother Marcus lived in Chicago running a successful architectural firm specializing in historic building restoration. When she explained my situation, he offered immediate help. "That girl needs a fresh start and people who believe in her potential," Marcus told his sister. "Send her to me." Marcus Patterson was a distinguished Black man in his 50s who'd built his business from nothing after growing up in poverty on the South Side. His wife Angela worked as a trauma therapist specializing in adolescent abuse survivors. Their twin daughters, Sophie and Grace, were 10 years old, bright and energetic girls who needed supervision after school while their parents worked. The job offer was simple, live in their converted apartment above the garage, help with childcare and light housekeeping, earn enough to pay for community college classes. In exchange, they'd provide stability, support, and the chance to rebuild my life on my own terms. Angela took one look at my frightened, hollow-eyed appearance and immediately understood what I'd endured. She didn't push for details or insist on immediate therapy, just created safe space for healing to happen naturally. Marcus treated me like family from day one, teaching me about architecture and business while encouraging my natural intelligence. The twins welcomed me as their honorary big sister, never knowing the dark history that brought me to their home. Sophie loved art and music, always drawing pictures to decorate my small apartment. Grace was fascinated by math and science, asking endless questions about how buildings stayed standing and why bridges didn't fall down. Living with the Pattersons felt like discovering what family was supposed to be. Dinner conversations about books and current events, weekend trips to museums and parks, adults who listened when you spoke, who celebrated your achievements and supported you through difficulties. Meanwhile, back in Millbrook, Linda worked overtime to control the narrative about my departure. She told extended family that I'd become increasingly unstable and violent, that she'd tried everything, but finally had to choose between my welfare and Emma's safety. She painted herself as a heartbroken mother, making impossible sacrifices to protect her younger daughter. Emma, traumatized by the chaos of graduation, Knight accepted this explanation because it was easier than questioning everything she believed about her family. She had no context for understanding abuse, no reason to doubt her mother's version of events. In her mind, Cassidy was the troubled sister who'd finally gone too far, and Rick was the stepfather trying to hold their broken family together. The court proceedings happened quietly with minimal media attention. Rick's attorney painted me as a disturbed teenager with a history of behavioral problems, making false accusations to get attention. Linda's testimony supported this narrative, describing years of trying to help her difficult older daughter who repeatedly lied and caused drama. When the case was dismissed, Rick returned home as if nothing had happened. Linda welcomed him back, grateful that their marriage and reputation survived intact. Emma went back to her normal teenage life, relieved that the family crisis was over and her graduation from 8th grade could proceed without drama. But Mrs. Patterson wasn't finished fighting for justice. She kept detailed records of everything, stayed in touch with Detective Collins, and made sure the case file remained open for future reference. She also maintained contact with me in Chicago, becoming the grandmother figure I'd never had. As my first year with the Pattersons drew to a close, I realized something profound had happened. For the first time since my father died, I felt genuinely safe and valued. Marcus and Angela never made me feel like charity case or broken goods. They saw potential where others had seen problems, offered opportunity where others had offered judgment. The scared, damaged girl who arrived in Chicago was slowly transforming into someone stronger. I was ready to start building the life I'd always deserved, far from the people who'd failed to protect me when I needed them most. Chicago became my sanctuary and my classroom. While Emma finished high school in Millbrook, I threw myself into recreating my identity from the ground up. Community college felt like luxury after years of struggling through trauma-induced academic problems. My grades soared as my mind cleared, no longer clouded by fear and hypervigilance. Marcus taught me to see buildings as stories written in stone and steel. We'd walk through downtown neighborhoods, him pointing out architectural details and explaining how historic structures could be preserved while adapting to modern needs. His passion for restoration became mine as I realized how perfectly it matched my own journey of rebuilding something broken into something beautiful. Angela helped me process the psychological aftermath of abuse without pushing too hard or too fast. She recommended books about trauma recovery, taught me meditation techniques for managing anxiety, and created space for me to talk when I was ready. Most importantly, she helped me understand that survival was just the first step toward thriving. Business school at Northwestern University felt like stepping into another world. Professors who respected my ideas, classmates who saw intelligence instead of damage, opportunities that opened doors instead of closing them. I discovered an intuitive understanding of real estate markets, could walk through a neglected building and envision its highest potential. My senior thesis focused on adaptive reuse of historic properties in underinvested neighborhoods. The research won academic awards and caught attention from several Chicago development firms. But I had bigger dreams than working for someone else's vision. Second Chances Properties launched in 2018 with Marcus as my business mentor and Angela handling the psychological aspects of working with property owners facing foreclosure or family transitions. Our specialty became historic buildings that other developers considered too risky or expensive to restore. The first project was a crumbling Victorian mansion in Wicker Park that had been abandoned for 15 years. Previous owners couldn't afford necessary renovations. The city was preparing to demolish for safety reasons. I secured financing, hired skilled craftsmen, and spent 18 months bringing that house back to life. When we sold it to a young family who dreamed of owning something special, I felt the same satisfaction Marcus described when discussing his favorite projects. This wasn't just business, it was redemption made tangible. Word spread quickly through Chicago's tight-knit preservation community. Property owners sought us out specifically because we understood that buildings held memories and emotional significance beyond mere monetary value. We developed a reputation for treating each project with respect while delivering exceptional results. The business grew steadily. 3 employees became 8, then 15. We opened a satellite office in Milwaukee, another in Indianapolis. By my 28th birthday, Second Chances Properties was handling 12 projects simultaneously across the Midwest with a waiting list of potential clients. Financial success felt surreal after years of poverty and instability. My downtown condo overlooked Lake Michigan. My wardrobe consisted of tailored suits and designer dresses. My calendar filled with charity galas and professional networking events. But the greatest luxury was psychological peace, knowing I'd built this life through my own efforts and intelligence. Marcus and Angela watched my transformation with parental pride. Sophie and Grace, now teenagers themselves, introduced me as their honorary big sister at school events. I'd become part of their family in every way that mattered, proof that chosen family could be stronger than biological ties. Meanwhile, I monitored my Millbrook family from a distance through social media and occasional Google searches. Emma graduated high school as valedictorian, earned a teaching degree from Missouri State University, and began working at Millbrook Elementary School. Her Facebook photos showed a happy young woman who looked remarkably like our father, surrounded by friends and enjoying normal life experiences I'd never had. Rick and Linda's marriage deteriorated gradually, then spectacularly. He was arrested again in 2021 for inappropriate contact with a 16-year-old co-worker's daughter. This time, there was physical evidence, reliable witnesses, and a victim whose family believed her immediately. Rick pled guilty to avoid trial, served 18 months in county jail, and was required to register as a sex offender. Linda filed for divorce while he was incarcerated, claiming she'd had no idea about his predatory behavior. She sold their house, moved into a small apartment, and took on extra nursing shifts to support herself financially. The perfect life she'd protected by sacrificing her older daughter had crumbled anyway. Emma seemed confused by these developments, posting vague social media messages about family difficulties and trusting God through challenging times. She'd started dating Jake Morrison, a social worker from Springfield, who specialized in helping at-risk teenagers. Their relationship looked genuine and healthy, based on shared values and mutual respect. When their engagement photos appeared online, I felt unexpected emotional complexity. Pride in Emma's apparent happiness, sadness about missing her entire adult life, curiosity about what kind of man Jake was and whether he truly understood Emma's family history. Then the wedding announcement appeared, along with something that made my heart race with possibility. The ceremony would be held at Rosewood Manor, a historic venue 40 minutes outside Millbrook that had been struggling financially since COVID-19 restrictions damaged the events industry. Rosewood Manor was where my high school prom had been held 6 years earlier, the same ballroom where Rick had cornered me near the coat check while other students danced nearby, whispering threats about what would happen if I told anyone about our secret. The same property where I'd spent that night feeling trapped and helpless, surrounded by classmates who had no idea what was happening. When the manor's owners contacted Second Chances Properties about selling due to financial distress, I saw an opportunity for the most meaningful project of my career. Not revenge, but something more powerful: transformation. I purchased Rosewood Manor through a shell company financing immediate renovations to restore its original grandeur while adding modern amenities. The ballroom, where I'd felt powerless as a teenager, became my laboratory for creating something beautiful from something damaged. As Emma's wedding approached, I made a decision that would have seemed impossible 11 years earlier. I was going home not as the broken girl who'd been cast out, but as the successful woman who'd built her own redemption story. The invitation would come through my ownership of the venue. Emma would get her dream wedding at a price her teacher's salary could afford, never knowing that her estranged big sister had made it possible. Justice, I'd learned, wasn't always about punishment. Sometimes it was about proving that the people who discarded you were wrong about your worth. Sometimes it was about showing up when they least expected it, transformed beyond their ability to diminish you ever again. Rosewood Manor glows like something from a fairy tale as guests arrive for Emma's evening ceremony. I've spent months ensuring every detail reflects elegance and timeless beauty. Crystal chandeliers cast warm light across restored hardwood floors. Fresh flowers from local gardens fill antique vases. And the same ballroom where I once felt powerless now radiates joy and celebration. I position myself strategically near the back during the ceremony, wearing a sophisticated black cocktail dress that commands respect without drawing undue attention. My auburn hair falls in soft waves past my shoulders, professionally styled but natural looking. Diamond earrings catch the light as I watch my baby sister promise to love and honor a man who clearly adores her. Emma looks radiant in her grandmother's restored lace gown, the same dress our mother wore in 1989. Her blonde hair is swept into an elegant updo, decorated with tiny pearls, and her smile illuminates the entire room as she speaks vows she obviously wrote herself. Jake stands beside her in a classic navy suit, tears streaming down his face as he listens to her words about finding her best friend and life partner. Their love appears genuine and deep, based on shared values and mutual support, rather than the desperate neediness that often masquerades as romance. During their vows, Jake mentions his commitment to helping children who've experienced trauma through his work with the state's Child Protective Services. Emma talks about creating safe spaces for learning in her elementary school classroom. They're building their life around service to others, particularly vulnerable young people. The guest list represents Millbrook's small-town social fabric. I recognize faces from my childhood former teachers, family friends, Emma's high school classmates who stayed local after graduation. My extended family occupies several front rows, looking prosperous and content in their carefully chosen outfits. Uncle Tom, my mother's older brother, has gained significant weight and gone completely gray since I last saw him. His wife Nancy looks elegant in navy blue, their adult children scattered around them with spouses, and grandchildren I've never met. Aunt Martha, Linda's younger sister, sits alone near the aisle wearing a floral dress that emphasizes her gentle personality. Cousin Brian, who was my age and had been my closest friend during childhood, now wears a police officer's dress uniform decorated with commendation ribbons. His wife Sarah holds their toddler son while pregnant with their second child. Brian looks confident and successful, exactly what everyone expected from the star athlete who'd earned a full scholarship to college before joining law enforcement. Linda sits in the front row wearing a rose-colored dress that complements her still blonde hair. She appears older than her 53 years, with lines around her eyes that suggest worry or stress. Her smile during the ceremony seems forced, as if she's performing happiness rather than feeling it naturally. She's alone, having apparently brought no date to her daughter's wedding. As guests move into the ballroom for cocktail hour, I observe family dynamics with the analytical eye I've developed through years of business negotiations. Uncle Tom holds court near the bar, telling stories that make other men laugh loudly. Aunt Martha gravitates toward women with children asking gentle questions about their families while offering compliments on their outfits. Cousin Brian patrols the room with subtle awareness I recognize from professional training, scanning faces and exits while maintaining casual conversation with old friends. When his gaze settles on me for several seconds, I sense recognition stirring beneath conscious awareness. The venue staff treats me with deference that probably confuses other guests. The catering manager asks my opinion about serving timing. The photographer requests permission before taking pictures near certain architectural features. The wedding planner checks with me before making announcements. These small interactions signal my special status without explicitly revealing ownership. During dinner, I'm seated at a table with other unaccompanied guests, two of Emma's unmarried teacher colleagues, an elderly family friend, and Jake's cousin visiting from Kansas City. The conversation flows easily as we discuss education travel and local happenings. When someone asks about my work, I mention real estate development in Chicago, without elaborating on my company's success. Emma gives a heartfelt speech thanking family and friends for supporting their relationship. Her voice catches with emotion as she mentions missing important people who couldn't be present. I especially want to acknowledge my big sister, Cassie, who I haven't seen in too many years. Cassie, wherever you are, I hope you know how much I've missed having you in my life. You taught me to be strong and independent, and I carry those lessons with me always. Linda's champagne glass slips from her hand, shattering against the hardwood floor with a sound that makes several guests jump. A server quickly cleans the mess, while Linda apologizes for her clumsiness, but her face has gone pale beneath carefully applied makeup. Around the room, family members exchange glances and whispered comments. They remember Cassidy Walsh, the troubled teenager who disappeared after high school graduation. Some probably wondered what happened to me over the years, whether I was alive or dead, successful or struggling. Jake's response to Emma's tribute reveals his protective nature and limited understanding of family history. He wraps his arms around his new wife, whispering something in her ear that makes her smile through threatening tears. His expression suggests he's heard stories about Emma's missing sister that painted me as someone dangerous or disturbed. As the evening progresses, I watch my family adapt to wealth and elegance they couldn't have afforded independently. The venue's original price would have consumed most of Emma and Jake's savings, but my shell company offered it at cost through an anonymous benefactor who wanted to support local couples starting their marriages. Uncle Tom mentions the venue's generosity to several people, speculating about who might have provided such unexpected kindness. Nancy suggests it was probably someone from the community who remembered Emma as an exceptional student or admired Jake's work with troubled youth. Brian studies me more intensely as the night continues his police training, sharpening recognition that hovers just beyond conscious awareness. When our eyes meet across the crowded ballroom, I see the moment pieces begin falling into place. His expression shifts from vague familiarity to shocked understanding. The 10-year-old girl who used to climb trees in his backyard has grown into a confident woman wearing designer clothes and expensive jewelry. The family disappointment who left under mysterious circumstances has transformed into someone who clearly belongs in sophisticated settings. As the band begins their final set and guests prepare for Emma and Jake's last dance, I realize my time as anonymous observer is ending. Brian approaches my table with determined steps, his wife following curiously behind him. The moment of recognition has arrived, and with it the beginning of confrontations I've spent 11 years preparing myself to handle with grace and strength. Cassidy Walsh, is that really you, Brian's voice cuts through the gentle murmur of wedding reception conversation, like a blade through silk. His police officer's training has connected the dots between the uncertain 10-year-old girl he once knew and the poised woman sitting confidently at table 12. The question rings across our immediate vicinity, causing several heads to turn with sudden interest. I meet his gaze steadily, allowing a small smile to play across my lips. "Hello, Brian. You look well. Congratulations on your promotion to detective." His wife Sarah stares at me with obvious confusion, holding their sleeping toddler against her shoulder, while her pregnant belly stretches the fabric of her maternity dress. She's heard family stories about the mysterious Cassidy, who vanished after graduation, but those stories clearly didn't prepare her for meeting someone like me. Detective Collins told me you'd moved to Chicago. Brian continues his voice, carrying across more tables now as other guests begin paying attention to our exchange. She said you were doing well, but this... He gestures toward my elegant appearance, the expensive jewelry catching ballroom light. You've clearly done more than just survive. Across the room, Linda freezes mid-conversation with one of Emma's former teachers. The champagne glass she'd been holding slips again, but this time, she catches it before it falls. Her face drains of color as she recognizes her older daughter for the first time in 11 years. Emma, radiant in her wedding gown, turns at the sound of my name being spoken. Her blue eyes, so much like our father's, widen with disbelief as she processes what she's seeing. The sister she's mourned and missed stands 20 feet away, transformed beyond anything her memories could have prepared her for. Cassie. Her voice breaks on my childhood nickname, tears already forming as emotion overwhelms her carefully applied makeup. Oh my God, Cassie, is it really you? She runs toward me in her flowing gown, heedless of the train that trails behind her, or the guests who scramble to clear a path. When she reaches my table, I stand to meet her embrace, and for a moment we're just two sisters reuniting after far too much time apart. Emma feels smaller than I remember, more delicate, though she's grown into the beautiful woman everyone predicted she'd become. Her tears dampen my shoulder as she holds me tightly, whispering apologies and endearments that make my own eyes burn with unexpected emotion. I've missed you so much, she says between sobs. I've looked for you online, tried to find contact information, asked everyone if they'd heard anything. Where have you been? Why didn't you call? Are you okay? You look incredible. Jake approaches more cautiously, his social worker instincts, making him sensitive to emotional undercurrents he doesn't fully understand. His expression shows protectiveness toward Emma, mixed with curiosity about the sister whose absence has clearly been a source of ongoing pain for his wife. Emma's told me so much about you, he says warmly, extending his hand for a formal introduction. I'm Jake Morrison, and I'm honored to finally meet the big sister who means the world to her. Before I can respond, other family members begin gravitating toward our reunion, like iron filings drawn to a magnet. Uncle Tom abandons his conversation at the bar, Nancy hurrying to keep up with his determined stride. Aunt Martha rises from her chair with tears already flowing, her gentle heart clearly overwhelmed by seeing me again. The ballroom's atmosphere shifts as word spreads through the gathered guests. Emma's teacher friends look confused, but happy for what appears to be a joyful family reunion. Jake's relatives from Kansas City observe with polite interest. The older generation of Millbrook residents who remember the Walsh family drama watch with sharp attention, hungry for details about the story behind my disappearance and return. Cassidy Walsh, as I live and breathe, Uncle Tom booms in his characteristic loud voice. Look at you, girl, you've grown into quite the lady. Where in the Sam Hill have you been all these years? Nancy's approach is more subdued, her eyes taking in details of my appearance, with the calculating precision of someone accustomed to assessing social status through clothing and accessories. My dress alone probably cost more than most people in Millbrook spend on their entire wedding guest wardrobe. You look wonderful, dear, she says carefully. We've all wondered what became of you after... Her voice trails off as she realizes she's approaching sensitive territory in front of Emma and Jake. Aunt Martha reaches us last, moving slowly, but with obvious emotion. Of all my mother's siblings, she was always the most gentle, the most willing to see good in difficult situations. When she takes my hands in hers, her touch conveys years of regret and missed opportunities. I should have done more, she whispers, her voice thick with tears. I should have stayed in touch, should have fought harder to understand what really happened. Can you forgive a foolish old woman for failing you when you needed family most? The weight of her words, the genuine remorse in her voice threatens to crack the composed facade I've maintained all evening. But before I can respond, Linda finally approaches our growing circle, moving like someone walking toward her own execution. My mother looks older than her 53 years, as if the weight of whatever she's carried since our last encounter has aged her prematurely. Her rose-colored dress hangs loosely on a frame that appears smaller than I remember, and her hands shake slightly as she stops just outside our family cluster. Cassidy. My name on her lips sounds like a prayer and an accusation simultaneously. You look beautiful. You look successful. She pauses, struggling with words that seem too large for her throat. I never expected to see you again. Emma looks between us with growing confusion, her joy at our reunion beginning to mix with awareness that something significant remains unspoken. Jake's social worker training is clearly picking up on undercurrents of tension and unresolved conflict that don't match the happy reunion narrative. Mom's told me about the problems you had before you left, Emma says carefully, still holding my hand as if afraid I might disappear again. She said you were struggling with some difficult stuff that you needed space to work things out on your own. I've always hoped you were okay out there somewhere. The carefully constructed lie hangs in the air between us like smoke, waiting to be either dispersed by truth or allowed to thicken into permanent obscuration. I feel the weight of 11 years' worth of decisions pressing down on this single moment. Jake's next words reveal how thoroughly Linda has shaped the family narrative about my departure. Emma's mentioned how hard it was when you had to leave. She said the whole family tried to help, but sometimes people need professional support that families can't provide. I work with a lot of kids who've been through trauma, so I understand how complicated these situations can be. The irony cuts deep. Jake dedicates his professional life to helping children who've experienced abuse, yet he has no idea he's married into a family that failed to protect one of their own. Emma believes her mother tried to help her troubled sister, never knowing that Linda chose protection of reputation over protection of her child. Brian watches this exchange with increasing intensity, his detective instincts clearly sensing that something important remains hidden beneath the surface of our reunion. He knows more about my departure than the others because Detective Collins shared some details of the investigation, but even he doesn't understand the full scope of what really happened. The moment stretches taut with unspoken truths and carefully maintained deceptions. In the next few minutes, I'll need to decide whether to preserve the comfortable lies that allowed this family to move forward or reveal the painful truths that might finally bring genuine healing. As I look around at these faces from my past, some guilty and some ignorant, some hopeful and some fearful, I realize that the scared 17-year-old girl who left Millbrook in disgrace has been replaced by a woman with the power to choose her own ending to this story. Jake, you mentioned working with kids who've been through trauma. I say, my voice carrying clearly through the suddenly hushed ballroom. What would you say to a teenager who tried to report sexual abuse but wasn't believed by her own family? The question hangs in the air like a challenge, and I watch Jake's expression shift from polite interest to sharp professional focus. His training in recognizing signs of historical trauma is clearly engaging as he studies my face, looking for the telltale markers he's learned to identify in his young clients. Emma's hand tightens in mine, confusion and growing concern evident in her blue eyes. Cassie, why are you asking about that? What does that have to do with anything? Linda takes a step backward as if my words carried physical force, her face going ashen beneath carefully applied foundation. Brian's detective instincts sharpen visibly as he begins connecting dots between my question and the old case file he's probably reviewed. I'd tell that teenager that she did nothing wrong. Jake responds carefully, his social worker training making him take my question seriously despite the wedding setting. I'd tell her that adults who don't believe children reporting abuse are failing in their most basic responsibility to protect the vulnerable. even if believing her meant admitting that everyone in authority had made terrible mistakes. I continue watching Linda's face crumple with each word, even if it meant acknowledging that a family chose protecting their reputation over protecting their child. Emma drops my hand, stepping back with dawning horror as she begins to understand what I'm really saying. Cassie, no, you can't mean what I think you mean. Your sister is talking about Rick, Brian says quietly, his police training making him unwilling to let truth remain buried. She's talking about what really happened before she left town. The name hits Emma like a physical blow. Rick, the stepfather she'd loved and trusted, who'd walked her down the aisle when she graduated high school because our mother insisted he deserved that honor. Rick, who'd been arrested years later for inappropriate contact with another teenager. But by then, his crimes against me had been forgotten or dismissed as ancient history. Mom, Emma's voice cracks as she turns toward Linda. Mom, what is she talking about? What really happened? Linda's carefully constructed facade finally begins to crumble under the weight of truth she spent 11 years avoiding. Her hands shake as she reaches for a nearby chair to steady herself, tears threatening to ruin makeup that suddenly seems garish and inappropriate. Emma, sweetheart, you don't understand. Linda begins, her voice high and desperate. Cassie was troubled back then. She was angry and confused, making up stories to get attention. I tried to help her, but she wouldn't accept counseling or medication or anything that could have made her better. She's still lying, Aunt Martha says suddenly, her gentle voice carrying surprising strength. Linda, stop it. Stop lying to protect yourself. We all knew something was wrong with Rick. We all saw how Cassie changed when he came into the house. We were just too cowardly to speak up. Uncle Tom's face flushes red with shame and anger as memories he suppressed for over a decade come flooding back. Jesus Christ, Linda. That night at graduation when Cassie was screaming in the garage when Rick's shirt was torn and she was hysterical, we all knew, and we let you convince us she was the problem. Jake's professional composure cracks as understanding hits him full force. The woman he married grew up in a house where sexual abuse was covered up, and the victim was punished for speaking truth. His new wife has spent her entire adult life believing lies about her sister's character, because facing reality was too painful for the adults who should have protected both girls. Emma, I say gently, taking her trembling hands in mine. I tried to tell Mom what Rick was doing to me. For 3 years, he came into my room at night when she worked late shifts. He told me nobody would believe a troubled teenager over a respected businessman. He was right. Emma's legs give out, and Jake catches her before she can collapse completely. Tears stream down her face as she processes years of carefully maintained delusions crashing into devastating reality. But Mom said, she told me you were lying, that you were just jealous because I got along with Rick better. She said you made up stories to break up her marriage. Emma's voice becomes smaller with each word, the confident young woman replaced by a confused child trying to reconcile competing versions of truth. I wasn't lying, I say simply. Mrs. Patterson documented Rick's behavior and called the police. He was arrested, but Mom bailed him out and testified against me in court. The case was dismissed because she convinced everyone I was an unstable teenager seeking attention. Brian pulls out his phone, accessing files he's apparently carried for years. Detective Collins kept the case open. All the evidence Mrs. Patterson collected, all the documentation of Rick's pattern of predatory behavior. When he was arrested again in 2021, we finally had enough to prosecute. The revelation that Rick's crimes continued after my departure hits the family like another devastating blow. Linda's choice to protect him hadn't saved anyone. It had simply enabled him to find other victims while destroying her relationship with her older daughter. He's in the state registry now. Brian continues his professional detachment, faltering as personal guilt overwhelms his composure. 18 months in county lockup required counseling, lifetime registration as a sex offender. Everything Cassie tried to tell us was true. Jake's face shows the horror of someone who dedicates his life to protecting children from exactly this type of family betrayal. His arms tighten around Emma as she sobs against his shoulder, her wedding dress now stained with tears and devastation. "I'm sorry," Aunt Martha whispers, approaching me with obvious remorse. "Cassie, I'm so sorry we failed you. I knew something was wrong, but I was scared and selfish, and I convinced myself it wasn't my place to interfere. I've regretted my silence every day since you disappeared." Uncle Tom's shame manifests as anger directed at Linda. "You destroyed your own daughter to protect a predator. You threw away your firstborn child to keep a monster in your house. How do you live with yourself?" Linda finally breaks, completely collapsing into a chair as years of suppressed guilt and denial explode into agonized weeping. "I couldn't face it," she gasps between sobs. "I couldn't admit that I'd brought someone dangerous into our home. I couldn't accept that I'd failed to protect my own child. It was easier to believe she was lying than to face what I'd done." The ballroom has gone completely silent except for Linda's desperate crying and Emma's heartbroken sobs. Wedding guests stand frozen, uncertain whether to leave or stay, witnessing the implosion of carefully maintained family myths that have shaped decades of relationships. Then the venue manager approaches our devastated family circle, carrying a clipboard and wearing the apologetic expression of someone about to deliver important information at an inappropriate time. "Excuse me," he says quietly. "I'm sorry to interrupt, but the owner of Rosewood Manor would like to address the wedding party before the evening concludes. If you could gather in the main ballroom, please." Emma looks up from Jake's shoulder with confused, tear-swollen eyes. Through her devastation, she manages to ask, "What owner? I thought the venue was provided by an anonymous benefactor." I stand slowly, smoothing my black dress and meeting the eyes of every family member gathered around us. The scared, broken teenager they discarded has grown into someone with the power to control their narratives and determine their futures. "That would be me," I say calmly. "I own Rosewood Manor. I purchased it 6 months ago through Second Chances Properties, my real estate development company based in Chicago. The anonymous benefactor who made your dream wedding affordable was the same sister you believed was too troubled and dangerous to deserve your support." The revelation hits them like a physical force. Not only did I survive their abandonment and thrive beyond their wildest imagination, I secretly orchestrated the most important day of Emma's adult life, while they continued believing I was either dead or struggling somewhere in poverty and obscurity. And as understanding dawns across their faces, I see the moment they realize that justice has already been served, not through revenge or cruelty, but through the undeniable proof that their judgment was catastrophically wrong about my worth, my character, and my potential. The main ballroom falls completely silent as my words sink into the consciousness of 60 wedding guests who've just witnessed a family secret explode into devastating truth. Emma stares at me with wonder breaking through her tears, Jake's protective arm still wrapped around her trembling form. The woman they've spent the evening admiring as an elegant, mysterious guest has revealed herself as both victim and victor in a story that challenges everything they thought they knew. "You own this place," Emma whispers, her voice barely audible above the distant sound of wind through old oak trees outside. "You made my wedding possible." I nod, feeling the weight of 11 years lift from my shoulders as truth finally displaces the lies that have shaped our family's narrative. Second Chances Properties specializes in restoring historic buildings that other people consider too damaged to save. This venue was heading toward demolition when I purchased it. We spent 8 months bringing it back to its original beauty while adding modern conveniences. Uncle Tom's face shows a mixture of amazement and deep shame as he processes the implications of my revelation. The niece he helped cast out has become successful enough to purchase and restore a property worth several $1 million. "Cassie, my God, we had no idea. We believed your mother when she said you were..." Trouble, dangerous, mentally unstable. I supply the words he's struggling to voice. Those were easier stories to believe than admitting you'd all failed to protect a child being abused in plain sight. Aunt Martha approaches me with tears streaming down her face, her gentle hands reaching for mine with obvious hesitation. Can you ever forgive us? Can you forgive a family of cowards who chose comfort over courage when you needed us most? The question hangs in the air like incense, heavy with the weight of years spent carrying hurt that could have been healed with honesty and accountability. I look around at faces that shaped my childhood, some guilty and some ignorant, all now confronted with consequences of choices made long ago. Aunt Martha, you tried to help within the limits of what you thought was possible, I say gently. The difference between you and some others is that you actually feel remorse for not doing more. Linda remains collapsed in her chair, no longer crying, but staring at her hands with the hollow expression of someone whose carefully constructed reality has been permanently shattered. The daughter she sacrificed to protect her marriage has grown into everything she herself aspired to be. Successful, respected, financially secure, surrounded by people who genuinely care about her well-being. Brian steps forward, his police training helping him navigate emotionally charged situations with professional composure despite personal involvement. Cassie Detective Collins has wanted to contact you for years. She kept your case file active, documented everything Mrs. Patterson reported, maintained evidence that eventually helped convict Rick when he targeted someone else's daughter. Mrs. Patterson saved my life, I acknowledge. She saw truth when my own family chose blindness. She connected me with people in Chicago who gave me opportunities to rebuild myself from the ground up. Jake's social worker background helps him understand the significance of what I've accomplished. Abuse survivors who escape their situations without family support face overwhelming statistical odds against thriving in adulthood. My success represents not just personal achievement, but professional-level trauma recovery that most people never accomplish. Emma's told me about her childhood memories of you, he says carefully. She remembers you as protective, intelligent, creative. She's carried guilt for years about not understanding why you left, why the family couldn't help you work through whatever problems you were facing. Emma finally lifts her head from Jake's shoulder, her wedding makeup ruined, but her eyes showing clarity that's been missing for 11 years. I remember how you used to read to me at bedtime, how you'd make up stories about brave princesses who rescued themselves instead of waiting for princes to save them. I remember you teaching me to ride my bike, to braid friendship bracelets, to stand up to bullies at school. The memories she shares are precious gifts, proof that our early sisterly bond survived the lies and manipulations that came later. They also reveal how thoroughly Linda distorted Emma's understanding of my character and our relationship. Those are the memories you should keep, I tell her. Everything else was adults making decisions that had nothing to do with who you were or who I was. We were children caught in circumstances beyond our control. Uncle Tom clears his throat, his businessman's instincts helping him focus on practical matters when emotions become overwhelming. Cassie, I want to reimburse you for tonight's expenses. Emma and Jake shouldn't start their marriage accepting charity even from family. Especially from family they abandoned. Nancy adds quietly, her social awareness, making her understand the complexity of gift-giving in damaged relationships. I smile at their discomfort, not cruel, but genuinely amused by their attempt to rewrite power dynamics that have already shifted permanently in my favor. This isn't charity. It's an investment in something I believe in Emma's happiness and the possibility that some relationships can be rebuilt on foundations of honesty instead of convenient lies. Emma approaches me slowly, her wedding train trailing behind her, like a symbol of the childhood innocence she's had to abandon tonight. When she reaches me, she takes my hands in hers with the same gentle touch I remember from our bedtime stories and bicycle lessons. Will you stay in touch this time? She asks. Will you give me a chance to know my sister as an adult to build the relationship we should have had all these years? The request touches something deep in my chest that I'd protected for over a decade. The scared teenager who left Millbrook had convinced herself that family ties were too dangerous to maintain, that survival required complete separation from people who'd failed her. But the successful woman I've become has resources for setting boundaries while remaining open to connections that serve both parties. I'd like that, I tell her honestly, but it has to be based on truth, not comfortable stories that protect people from acknowledging their mistakes. I won't pretend the past didn't happen, and I won't accept responsibility for other people's choices to abandon me when I needed them most. Jake nods with the authority of someone trained in family systems therapy. That's exactly how healing happens. Truth-telling, accountability, genuine remorse, and commitment to different behavior going forward. Brian approaches with something he's been carrying in his jacket pocket, a business card worn from years of handling. Detective Collins asked me to give you this if I ever saw you again. She's retired now, but she wanted you to know that your courage in reporting what happened to you eventually helped put Rick away permanently. The card represents validation I'd stopped expecting to receive official acknowledgement that my accusations were credible, my suffering was real, and my decision to speak truth, despite family pressure, was morally correct. Linda finally raises her head, her face ravaged by tears and the collapse of decades of self-justification. Cassidy, I don't expect forgiveness. I don't deserve it. But I want you to know that not a day has passed without me wondering if I made the wrong choice. Seeing you now, seeing what you've become, despite everything we put you through, I know I failed you in every possible way. Her acknowledgement of responsibility feels different from the others' apologies. Less about seeking absolution, more about accepting accountability. It doesn't erase the damage she caused, but it represents the kind of honest reckoning that makes future relationship possible. Mom, you chose to protect a predator over your own child, I state clearly. That choice had consequences for all of us. Rick continued abusing other victims because you enabled him. Emma grew up believing lies about her sister's character. I spent my entire adult life building a chosen family because my biological one proved unreliable. The harsh truth hangs in the air like smoke, forcing everyone present to confront realities they've avoided for over a decade. The truth, however painful, creates space for genuine healing that lies and denial can never provide. However, I continue, I've learned that carrying anger is expensive. It costs energy that could be invested in building beautiful things instead of preserving ugly memories. I'm willing to explore what relationship might be possible between us, but it starts with acknowledging what actually happened and accepting responsibility for the damage that was done. Emma's face shows relief and hope as she realizes her sister isn't demanding permanent estrangement as payment for past wrongs. Jake's expression reflects professional admiration for the psychological health that allows someone to set boundaries without seeking revenge. As the evening draws to a close, guests begin departing with quiet conversations about what they've witnessed. Some will spread gossip through Millbrook's social networks, but others will carry sobering lessons about the importance of believing children and protecting the vulnerable. Emma and Jake linger near the entrance as family members say their awkward goodbyes, unsure of protocols for ending an evening that transformed from celebration to revelation to tentative reconciliation. Cassie, Emma says as Jake loads wedding gifts into their car. I know this probably isn't the right time, but I have to ask, what happens now? Where do we go from here? The question she's asking is larger than logistics or contact information. She's asking whether the sister she mourned for 11 years can become part of her adult life, whether the family relationships damaged by lies and betrayal can be rebuilt on foundations of truth and mutual respect. You focus on your marriage and your teaching career, I tell her. You build the life you want with someone who clearly loves you deeply. And when you're ready, when you've processed what you learned tonight, you call me. We'll figure out what kind of sisterly relationship works for the women we've become. I hand her a business card for Second Chances Properties, the same card that's opened doors throughout the Chicago business community. My contact information, the proof of my success, and an implicit promise that I'm no longer the powerless teenager they once discarded. One more thing, I add as Jake approaches to drive his wife home. Second Chances Properties is always looking for qualified teachers to help with our educational outreach programs. Historic preservation includes teaching communities about the value of maintaining connections to their past while building toward better futures. The job offer represents more than employment opportunity. It's an invitation for Emma to become part of the work I'm passionate about, to contribute her skills toward projects that transform broken things into beautiful things. As they drive away, wedding decorations still visible in their car's back window, I stand in the restored ballroom where I once felt powerless and traumatized. Tonight, in this same space, I've reclaimed my narrative and my family relationships on terms that honor both my survival and my success. The scared 17-year-old girl who was cast out of this town has been replaced by a woman with the resources to purchase historic properties, the wisdom to set healthy boundaries, and the generosity to make other people's dreams possible while building her own life according to her own values. Mrs. Patterson was right all those years ago when she told me that sometimes the family who chooses you is stronger than the family born to you. Marcus and Angela and their daughters will always be my primary family, the people who saw potential where others saw problems, and offered opportunity where others offered judgment. But tonight has opened space for biological family relationships rebuilt on foundations of honesty, accountability, and mutual respect. Not because I need their validation or approval, but because forgiveness and boundary setting can coexist, creating possibilities that seemed impossible when survival was my only priority. The greatest revenge against people who underestimated my worth was proving them wrong through living well. The greatest gift I can give my sister is showing her that survival is possible, that family betrayal doesn't have to define your entire life story, and that sometimes the people who hurt you most are capable of learning to do better. As I lock up Rosewood Manor and drive back toward Chicago, I carry new appreciation for the journey that brought me to this moment. Every difficulty I faced, every obstacle I overcame, every relationship I built and lost and rebuilt again, contributed to the strength that allowed me to stand confidently in that ballroom tonight. Second Chances Properties will continue restoring historic buildings that other people consider too damaged to save. But tonight I learned that the same principles apply to family relationships. With enough patience, skill, and commitment to truth, even the most broken things can be rebuilt into something more beautiful than they were before. Sometimes the greatest act of love is walking away from people who hurt you. Sometimes it's coming back when they've proven themselves capable of honesty and change. Wisdom lies in knowing the difference and having the courage to act accordingly. So here's my question for anyone listening to this story. When someone in your life has been hurt by family betrayal or institutional failure, do you believe them immediately, or do you wait for convenient proof that doesn't threaten your comfort? Do you choose the easy path of maintaining pleasant lies, or the harder path of supporting truth tellers, even when their stories challenge everything you want to believe about people you trust? Your response to that question might determine whether you're someone who helps build healing or someone who perpetuates harm. Choose wisely, because the children in your life are watching, learning, and forming expectations about whether adults can be trusted to protect the vulnerable or will prioritize their own comfort over doing what's right. Thank you for listening to my story, for witnessing the journey from powerlessness to empowerment, from abandonment to chosen family to tentative reconciliation. I hope it encourages you to believe survivors support truth tellers, and remember that broken things often contain the most beautiful possibilities for transformation. If this story resonated with you, please like this video to help others find it. Subscribe for more stories about resilience and recovery. Share it with someone who might need to hear that survival and success are possible after family betrayal, and leave a comment about your own experiences with forgiveness boundaries or chosen family. Your engagement helps these stories reach people who need to know they're not alone in their struggles. May you find the courage to tell your truth, the wisdom to set healthy boundaries, and the grace to build relationships worthy of your investment. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is prove wrong the people who underestimated your strength, your worth, and your capacity for creating beautiful things from broken beginnings.